Hello and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah, and today we will be talking about First Mage on the Moon by Cameron Johnston.
But first, our quick 5-minute introduction. What's something great that happened recently?
Something great that happened recently is a coworker came over, I guess I should say ex-coworker, former coworker, came over to pick up some camping gear that he's borrowing from me and stayed for a cup of tea, and we had a chat, and it was lovely to catch up.
Well, that is wonderful. It is funny how ex-coworker has a much more dramatic connotation than former coworker.
It really does.
I mean, there is drama in that every single person was let go all at once. But that, it implies interpersonal drama. Maybe just because of the boyfriend-girlfriend association.
I do think that association brings some connotations, implications.
Yeah, like saying ex-boss versus former boss. I make assumptions, right?
Yeah. Also, I'm going to have a second one because Dumpling is asleep and wagging her tail right now, and it's very cute.
Oh, sweetie. That is very good.
And it's happening right before my eyes, so I had to share.
My good thing is that I explored NorwestCon. I won't say I attended it because I was really only there for a couple of hours at the very end of the convention. But it is a local science fiction and fantasy convention up here near the airport in Seattle, which is very close to my house. So I was like, well,
I mean,
no
at that point,
to.
Yeah, at that point you gotta.
Mm-hmm. And we really just did the art show, the dealer's hall. We didn't actually attend any panels, so I don't know how that went. But just, the environment is nice. And one of our friends had never been to a nerd convention before, so it was nice to usher him into that culture.
It means that next year you have to properly initiate him. He's dipped the toe in the water.
Exactly, yeah. And it was funny because I was my husband and his friend. We were wandering around looking for the board game free play session, and they walked past someone who was painting Warhammer figurines, and so that was a protracted distraction. But that was perfect because it was yes, these are our people.
Yeah.
It felt like a good glimpse into the world, if you will.
Well, that sounds like a lovely time.
It was really fun. What are you drinking today?
I have some oolong tea.
Lovely. I'm just drinking coffee.
I mean, that's also good, I guess.
Yeah. I was trying to think if there's a beverage I ought to be drinking for this book, but not really.
I mean, they do drink wine and mead, but also it is 10:30 in the morning.
Well, yes. I more meant, even though it's mentioned in the book, it doesn't feel thematic very much.
I feel like this book could be a cider book, honestly. It's not really mentioned, but it's got that kind of down and dirty practical vibe that I feel goes well with cider or beer, but I'm not a beer drinker.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. Well, have you read anything extracurricular lately?
A whole lot of job descriptions and
yeah.
and technical documentation for the take-home exercise that I'm doing for one of the application processes or the interview processes. But besides that, no.
Well, good luck, and I'm not going to ask if you would recommend it for others.
Probably a good choice.
So, First Mage on the Moon. I think it's pretty obvious from the title. We're looking at a science fantasy novel.
Which was a lot of fun. Honestly, that's one of the things that attracted me to this book. Just the title. Yeah. It sounded interesting. A neat concept.
Mm-hmm.
And overall, I think that it really delivers. I did really enjoy the book, but it was a little long. I thought it could have been condensed and tightened just a little bit.
I definitely agree. I particularly struggled with the beginning. I think it took a little bit too much time to get to the space race part. And not an egregious amount of time. I just, like you said, a little bit of tightening. And then also in the middle with a lot of technical scenes, And then also at the end, the whole book could have used a little tightening.
Yeah, I think mostly I didn't struggle with the beginning as much as you did, I think. I thought that was okay. And I really enjoyed the technical scenes of them building this rocket. They call it a Friar Dragon. They don't use the term rocket because this is science fantasy, it's not science fiction. So I really enjoyed those scenes, but I also feel like there were so many of them that we didn't need all of them for the story.
Yeah, they were very vibey with the vibe of the book, which was very good and fun, but they weren't doing a lot of additional things.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you got enough of them that after a certain point, they stopped bringing anything to the story other than just, hey, this is a fun scene.
Yeah. I think part of why I struggled with the beginning beyond the pacing was not this book's fault in any way, but what a piece of promotional material that we got with the book referred to it as horror slash supernatural thriller. And around page 82, I texted you, you know, sure there are zombies in this book, but I wouldn't exactly call it horror. And you were aghast.
Yeah, because it's not a horror book. And I think that was a mistake on the promotional material. Like not an intentional thing that they did. That's something left over from some other book that they were promoting.
I agree with you 100%. And of course, the one time I actually look at the additional stuff that comes with the book, because I so rarely do that.
I was a little surprised when you said that was where you got the idea that it was horror. And to be fair, none of the other like promotional material, none of the tags when you look at the book on websites call it horror. So this really was just a typo.
Truly. And like the only one is of course the one that I looked at. But I think that did sort of affect when I was trying to get into it in the beginning. It was A little slow, and B, not very thrillery.
Yeah, I mean that.
So I was kind of like confused, disgruntled, and waiting for about 100 pages, which is sort of an unfair sabotage for my reading experience.
Yeah, I mean it's unfair for the book a little bit, but not your fault, because if you go into it expecting that it's going to be two very specific genres that are not science fiction or fantasy, you are going to be a little disgruntled that it's not meeting your expectations.
So once that got cleared up, that's also, about a quarter of the way into the book was where that happened. It also picks up quite a bit, so I think a lot of things sort of aligned to shift my reading experience dramatically. Once I was approaching it with science fantasy in my head, I was so much more engaged.
Yes. And obviously that was not a problem that I had. I went in expecting science fantasy.
What a delightful blend also. I think some of the genre tags that I've seen for this have just said like fantasy, epic fantasy, but I think science fantasy is going to give you a much better idea of what you're in for.
I agree. I think it leans more on the fantasy than the science aspect, because the science is all powered by fantasy elements, right? They are using magic to create this rocket, but it's a really nice blend, and it was a really fun blend too. Like it was done really well, and it was neat to see them talk about the things they didn't know in very like 1600s religious terms, except mythology.
They were using magic, but they were approaching it with the scientific method, is kind of how I categorize it. So even though it was like, yes, we must pull ether out of the atmosphere to power these rune stones, they were still like, theorizing, trial and error, doing mathematical calculations. Like it felt, the tone was science, even though the content was not, which was honestly kind of perfect, because when we read harder sci-fi, it reads like magic to me anyway, because I don't know any of it.
Yeah, it
so
was,
like no difference.
It was a very scientific approach to using magic. And I agree. The perfect blend.
Yeah, and then just like just such a fun genre approach. I really enjoyed it. And also I love bonk science. So when the characters were saying things like, well, the stone is beloved by Mother Earth, so it returns to her instead of gravity or something. It was just delightful. And I love that those were the concepts they were working with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a really fun, not just fun premise, but a fun way of putting it together.
The execution, yeah.
Yeah. There was also a very somber bent to it. I mean, we've talked about how fun it was, but it starts off with the execution of a main character and then does a time skip back. And so you know from the get-go that it's not going to be all fun and games. Like you do have that very sinister aspect to it.
Yeah, that really does sort of underscore every scene, especially when you see him. Because I agree he's a main character, but he's definitely not one of the like core main characters.
Right.
He does not have as much page time after that opening scene as our engineer team does.
Yeah, the opening scene kind of gives you the impression that he's going to be central to the story, and he ends up being more secondary, but I would still call him a main character for the book.
Yes, absolutely. But because he's not in it as much, when he does show up, it's kind of reminds you.
Mhm.
You're going along and you're like, "Oh, Ella, she's improving her career. Good for you, girl." And then, Whitlaw shows up and it's like, "Oh, fuck, he dies." It's a very abrupt reminder, or at least it felt like it, not in a bad way, just in a, like you said, like in a sobering way. Like we know that this does not end great for everybody.
Yeah. And you can't forget it because you, like you say, you are reminded every time Whitlaw is on the page.
He was also probably my favorite character, despite his minimal page time in the first half of the novel. Because of that timing, I cannot talk about it until the spoiler section. But
I
uh,
I agree with you on both counts.
he was amazing, and part of it was because we saw such controlled bits of him, like from a narrative perspective. The like vision we have, the impression we have of his character was just so well curated, and everything about him was fantastic.
Yes, agreed. Speaking of characters, I really liked the disabled representation that we get in Ella, who is one of the main characters who also does actually get a lot of page time. She has had an accident piloting a skyship and can't use her legs, so she's in a wheelchair. And you really see a lot of that, not in a way that feels intrusive, but in a way that just feels emblematic of some of the issues that wheelchair users do face, like going over cobblestones and how much that sucks in a wheelchair, or being given quarters that require going up a bunch of stairs that she can't do because she's in a wheelchair.
Or even one stair, right? Like
Yeah.
people went, "Oh, it's just, you have to get over the threshold," which didn't even hit their radar, but for her is like an actual problem. I can't speak to the accuracy of her representation, but I felt like Johnston did a really amazing job in including accessibility issues in the novel and having her wheelchair use be consistent and important and part of her character. It didn't feel like, like representation sprinkles, you know,
Right.
like it actually felt like something that she genuinely struggled with every day of her life. And also didn't take over the plot. This book wasn't about her disability. She was just a person with a disability who is also going to the moon. And that felt like really a lovely balance for her to have those issues highlighted without reducing her to only those things.
Yes, I agree. It didn't feel like she was there to be the token disabled character.
Yeah.
But it also didn't feel like that was the only thing to her character.
Exactly, yeah. The frequency of those struggles in her scenes and the storyline, just the amount of page time it got felt really well balanced. And we're saying that about a lot of aspects of this book, but it's true. But you mentioned in our notes that your mom has said that cobblestones are indeed a pain in the butt, literally.
Yeah, so my mother doesn't use a wheelchair all the time, but she uses a wheelchair if she has to like do any kind of extended walking. So not necessarily for running to the store, but if she travels, she travels with a wheelchair. And a long time ago, like a decade ago, we went to Scotland and there are a lot of cobblestones in, Edinburgh, and that was definitely something that she complained about. So I can't speak to how accurate all of the representation of Ella's wheelchair use was, but that definitely struck a chord.
Yeah, well, it sounds like that's definitely a good sign.
Yeah.
Speaking of this book fitting into the real world, I know that this episode is not coming out today, but I sure was reading this book during the Artemis 2 landing. So that was pretty perfect.
It was incredible timing. And my understanding is that that's pretty accidental. But the fact that, yeah, we're reading a book about a moon race, a fantasy moon race, sure, but a race to the moon while there is an actual launch happening was pretty cool.
Yeah, although we did get arcs, so we're reading it a little bit before everyone else. So the timing was perfect for us.
Yes, the timing was perfect for us.
There was also some extremely timely, hey, maybe war is the worst themes in this book.
Yeah, this book is not shy about saying that war is bad, and a lot of the higher ups, like the upper class, profiteers from it, benefits from it economically. Science should be used to make life better and not to make more weapons. Yeah. It's not subtle.
Well, I think what struck me was this book specifically called out the upper class benefiting economically from the war, from the forever war between the two. There's the Unity, which is where most of our main characters are, and they've been in a war basically forever with the Empire, which we don't see very much. We get a little bit of it. And war is bad is not a hard argument to make, but to actually call out the specifics of why this forever war is being drawn out. And it's not the focus of the story in any way, but I appreciated the concrete call out.
Yeah, Johnston doesn't dance around the point.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
Mm-hmm. Anyone can say war is bad, but like, let's blame someone for it, you know?
But also, like, I feel that, and this is a little bit of a tangent, given that we're not talking about Andy Weir, but he came out recently and said, oh, my books never have a political message, whatever. And like that kind of bullshit. And so it's nice to see a novel acknowledge that, yeah, there's a point. There's a very clear point that I'm making here.
It's that the privilege of being able to ignore politics when, for a lot of people, really everybody, life is politics. Yeah. But it's just how much are you forced to deal with that day to day.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was not actually the point of this book. This book was fun, hijinks, going to the moon, except actually very sad.
So basically you get everything in it.
Just about. Who would read this book? Or who should read this book?
I think you should read this book if you like fun hijinks and the idea of this kind of science fantasy blend where you take a very scientific approach to doing something magical, but you also enjoy hurting because it does not have a happy ending. You know this is not a spoiler. You know it from the first chapter.
This episode of Fiction Fans is brought to you by Solsticia.
That's our zine. Each issue has a different theme that celebrates genre and genre blending in a new way.
PDF and EPUB versions can be purchased on our website, and Patreon supporters of all levels get free digital copies.
You can find all the issues and more at patreon.com/fictionfanspod. Thank you for all of your support.
The remainder of this episode contains spoilers. They do make it to the moon.
They do make it to the moon. What they find there, so they're looking for the city of the gods because they want to ask the gods, why do you allow this continued protracted war, which leads to all of this suffering? And they find it empty and abandoned. The gods have moved on, but they have left a caretaker of some sort who was a literal deus ex machina. And they've had all kinds of problems in actually getting to the moon, and then their flight back is essentially fine because the caretaker does its deus ex machina thing for them.
Fixes the ship, yeah.
Yeah. And I thought that was a little, like, I think it's related to the pacing issues, though.
That's interesting. I didn't have a problem with that because, so the idea is they want to confront the gods, like you said. And so, of course, the question I had is, are they going to get to the moon and there is a city of the gods, or is it going to be a moon? You know?
Yeah.
So for me, it really hinged on, are the gods real or not? But in a world where there are true deities, I think it would have felt cheap if whatever being that they found up there had gone, no, I cannot interfere. Like, that's bogus and very lame. So the fact that the caretaker did help them, I mean, they didn't, fix everything. They weren't like, yeah, Ella, you have legs that work again.
She does ask.
Which, of course, like, you have to ask. Like,
so I think my issue with the caretaker fixing everything is not so much specifically that the caretaker fixes everything. It's that we spend so much time on the building of the fire dragon and the problems in actually getting to the moon once they're, in space, that the amount of time that it took for them to get back, for everything to be hand waved away and magically fixed and for them to get back, just felt disproportionate.
Interesting. I thought that the ending felt unnecessarily drawn out. While they are ascending on their trip up to the moon, they are broadcasting to, like, all of the unsecured scrying stones, or whatever the magical verbiage was for it. And we kept getting yanked away from that journey to see, like, random people's reactions to this. And some of them felt relevant and compelling, but it happened too much and felt like it was just drawing out that process so that the ascension would take up more page length, which felt unnecessary.
I agree that some of those scenes felt unnecessary. And I didn't want the ascension to take more time specifically. I think it comes down to, I wouldn't have had an issue if the building of the rocket had been shorter.
Yeah. I think it's a lot of the scene types in this book, the building the rocket scene, the foreign national other research teams reacting to this broadcast, that kind of thing. They were interesting the first or second time, but then we got too many of them.
Yeah, it just, like we said at the beginning of this episode, the pacing was a little off. I think it needed to be tightened a little bit. Mm-hmm. It could have lost probably 100 pages.
Yeah. When Ella asks the caretaker, where are the gods? Why is this an empty city? And they say that this world is currently hosting no players. For a second, I thought it was going to be like, they're all in a video game. And I didn't know how I felt about that. And then we found out that that's not the case, and I was very glad.
Yeah, it did feel like there was going to be some kind of video game sci-fi aspect for a while.
Just the word players, I think.
Mm-hmm.
really hit that for me. I loved the inclusion that the gods are flippant and not at all invested in their creations and totally abandoned them and don't give a shit and we're just fucking around with them to begin with. That's all great. The gods are just playing games with the lives of mortals. Yes. If it had been like, this is actually a virtual world that people are phasing in and playing, that would have felt not cheap, but well, it doesn't matter. It didn't happen.
I agree. Although I will say that I would have liked to see more struggling with the idea that the gods are disinterested and don't care and have moved on. We see one of the characters struggle with it a little bit, but
we're told he's panicking while
yeah,
he's in the spaceship, but we don't really get a lot of that.
Yeah, I would have liked to see a little bit more of that just because this is a highly religious society. Both the Empire and Unity are pretty religious. And so to have that foundation kind of shaken should have been a big thing.
You'd think. And they do get punished for daring to trespass on the moon, but it was much more because it made the upper class look bad, and that I believe wholeheartedly.
Yes.
Speaking of this space journey, though, where did they pee?
So they bring it up because when they're in the rocket, they realize that gravity is a thing and they don't have gravity and they had buckets to pee in and that's not going to work. And then it's never talked about what their solution is.
Yeah, at the time, when it first comes up, they're just like, oh, well, I guess I'll hold it until we figure something out. And then 24 hours later, they're approaching the moon. And it's like, wait, no, I am invested in this now.
Yeah, you can't bring this question up and then just not answer it.
The character who does run into that problem, or addresses the problem for the audience, was Catherine, who was the alchemist slash mathematician on the team. And she was pretty ditzy slash privileged. It didn't bother me because that was clearly the point. And you often got Ella mentally going, oh boy, does not have a lot of life experience. So it was okay, but I would never want to be in the same room as her.
I don't know if I would go so far as to say I'd never want to be in the same room with her because she was nice, she was caring, she was friendly, but I don't know if I would be like good friends with her because she is very privileged and she starts to realize that a little bit as she works with the rest of the team, many of whom come from or some of whom come from much less privileged backgrounds like Ella. But she has a lot of growing up to do.
She does, and we don't really see it happen. I think it's implied. I mean, she goes through this very traumatic experience with the space exploration. She loses an arm just due to mechanical mishaps, basically, in the spaceship. And so I think we're supposed to assume that she has grown and has had a reality check, but we don't get to see any of that.
Yeah. And I mean, she does see her father executed when they get back down.
Also trauma.
Also trauma.
Okay, so I thought that was so interesting. Catherine is Whitlaw's daughter. Whitlaw being the chief of, they don't call it research and development, but that's basically what it is. The one who takes the fall, and we see him at the beginning get executed, taking all of the blame for the project so that no one else is punished. And I was just thinking, she had to be there. Okay, because think about like the two different versions of this story. If Whitlaw was just taking the blame for his employees going rogue and committing treason, that would have been so dark. Whereas this way, I mean, he is still kind of doing that, but it's also to save his daughter, which makes it more bittersweet and still extremely sad, but less like the incidental quirk of a cruel world and more like something he is doing on purpose to save people he cares about.
I mean, yes, the fact that he's doing it to save his daughter specifically adds a layer of intentionality to what he's doing.
Yeah, he's
And
not just getting the blame because he happened to be there. He's actually going out of his way to take the blame.
yeah, and it is really sweet. One of the things that I loved about his character was how focused he was on making sure that his daughter was going to be okay. And it's not that he, because they hide this project from him. He genuinely doesn't know what's happening for a good portion of the book. And when he finds out, his first thought is, well, okay, Catherine, I'm going to take you away and we'll leave the rest of these fools to do what they want and they can get the blame and deal with the consequences. And when she says no, that's when he says, okay, then I will take the fall. I mean, he
Well,
doesn't necessarily announce that to her, but internally.
yeah. And he realizes the project has to work because if they make it to the moon and back, then he can spin it as like a triumph, right? Whereas if the project kind of fizzles out halfway through, they have no leverage.
Yeah.
His politicking was so good.
Oh, it was excellent.
I loved it so much. The first hint we get is before he knows about the true purpose of this project. All he knows is that this like team of 4 dingus scientists have been given an unlimited budget and they're scheming like how can we milk this noble asshole for all he's worth and what can we spend money on. And Whitlaw says they will be watching you. Like this money comes with strings. Do not trust anybody, be so careful. And that was kind of the first moment where you're like, oh, he is very plugged in. Like he knows exactly what he's doing. He's a mid-level bureaucrat, but on purpose because it's safe there.
Yeah, and you don't even get that impression from the execution scene. Like in that first scene in the first chapter, like you think, okay, he's not necessarily that competent, but he's taking the fall because he loves his daughter and he wants her to survive. And then as the story progresses, you start to learn that actually he has a lot of sense and a lot of skill and also a lot of magical power. And he's decided that this is the level he wants to stay at because, like you said, it's safest for him.
Just learning how he has not manipulated everyone around him, but kind of a little bit. Not in a, exploitative way. Just his social and emotional intelligence is off the charts. And we learn that over the course of the book. And yeah, his character was fantastic. Oh, the scene at the end where he goes toe to toe with the battle mages are these like terrifying, badass, cream of the crop magic users. And we find out that he is as powerful as them. He just never told anyone because he didn't want to go to war. Like, brilliant.
So good. The one problem I had with his character, though, and this is not actually a problem with his character, I think it's a little bit more an issue with the implementation that Johnston does with this scene, is he is bargaining with the hierarch, this upper class nobleman, to spare the lives of everyone who worked on the fire dragon, and he'll take the fall for it. And he has some comment about how, like, if Grubman Lord Rack the Fourth does this, he can spin it so that Grubman Lord Rack will be seen as a hero. And I just didn't understand how that was going to happen. And it also is, I think, undermined by the fact that we learned that 3 years later there's a People's Revolution and Grubman Lordrak gets nailed to the door or something. He's like one of the first noblemen to suffer. And so I just didn't I needed a little bit more from that scene, but it's not the fact that Whitlaw was doing the scheming, because that I liked. It was just how, like, Johnston describes it.
Yeah, I would have even been okay with Whitlaw lying his ass off about it.
Yeah.
But that's just not what we see on the page.
Yeah.
I think that is, well, A, I love interpersonal politicking. B, I'm always going to be a character driven reader, but I think that really could have gotten more time. I wish the moments like dealing with the aftermath of this journey had more page time and less
Yes.
of the construction of the spaceship.
Yes. Yes, I agree. Like I said, I had a lot of fun with the construction of the spaceship, but I do think that some of that page time could have been given to other things and it would have been a stronger story.
Yeah. Because even if, yeah, Whitlaw was just playing Grubman, tell me that, you know?
Mm-hmm. But I also didn't get the sense that he was playing Grubman.
No, I don't think so. And he says, like, oh, I still have connections. We can still, like, spin this. And then we don't see any of that, which was too bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted the scene felt a little thin. I just wanted a little bit more, but not an issue with Grubman's character. I mean,
Right.
not Grubman, with Whitlaw's character.
Yeah, I agree. The cutaways to the Empire, the rival country, I really liked. Even though I said in some points there were too many cutaways, the ones to the Empire, well, that it always felt relevant because it was the big rival, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it was the Russia to the Unity's US.
Yeah. It first we see that character drinking vodka, and then near the end she says "niet," and it's like, okay, you're not trying to make me guess here.
No. Yeah, I would have liked to see again a little bit more of them, just because they were interesting characters, and I think that they could have added things, to the story. I liked what we saw, though.
Yeah, it is interesting, the promotional materials, and then also we have been saying space race to talk about this book. There's not actually they're not racing against someone else trying to get to the moon. They're racing against being caught trying to go to the moon.
Yeah, it's not a space race in the traditional sense.
Which I liked, because you don't want it to be too close of an allegory.
Yeah.
Or at least I don't.
Yeah, no, I don't think it needed to be an actual race against the Empire. And the Empire ends up helping them because they can't get all of the resources they need because the hierarch is onto them, or someone is onto them. And so Whitlaw reaches out to his counterpart in the Empire and is like, hey, we're trying to go to the moon. Do you want in on this? And
Which
she
is
does.
incredible. Like, that was amazing. Whitlaw's the coolest.
Good.
I'm sad that he died, but like it felt in character. I mean, of course, he was willing to do anything to save Catherine. It was just everything Whitlaw does is perfect.
I didn't want him to die, but also it made sense that he died.
Yeah. I will say there were a few moments around like the 3/4 mark that I was thinking to myself, did we see him truly die in the beginning? Or was he just standing in the gallows and then it cut to 3 years earlier?
I had that question myself too.
I didn't actually go back and check. I should have probably.
So we do see there's a line where it talks about how like the gods came and took his soul away or whatever. Yeah. So it is pretty clear that he does die, but I was wondering if that could be walked back a little bit.
Well, and I'm just saying 300 pages later, I didn't remember the specifics. So I think, yeah, I was pretty sure that it was not in question at all. But even then, the gods came and took his soul away. Until we find out that the gods have abandoned them, I was still like, they could have interfered, you know?
Or that could have just been some kind of euphemism for he, got knocked out.
Yeah. But that was just me loving Whitlaw with every fiber of my being.
I was really trying to find some kind of justification for myself as to why he would not be dead at the end of the book.
Yeah, I did never genuinely thought, or I was trying to find some gray area, but I was not very I was not genuinely like, oh, maybe there's a loophole there. Like, no.
Yeah, it was pretty clear, but I didn't want it to be clear.
Yeah.
I wanted him to survive.
But having it be concrete in that way, I think is what makes this book so emotionally powerful. You know he doesn't die when he's fighting the battle mage. you know?
Mm-hmm.
And you know that he does end up sacrificing everything to save this group of very smart fools. And that just adds to his character, because then everything you learn about him, you're like, oh, he did this fully eyes open on purpose. It was not the hierarch that gave him this deal. Like, he came up with and negotiated this.
Yeah, I mean, it adds a lot of emotional weight to his storyline.
Yeah. I just loved him the most.
Yeah.
I also liked, I liked the engineers too. Jacan? I don't remember his name, which kind of undercuts me saying how much I liked him.
Jacan.
Yeah.
However it's pronounced.
He was the one who was first working on this, although not exactly to go to the moon, but he's sort of the grizzled older engineer who just wants to make bridges, not weapons.
It starts off as a genuine attempt to make a weapon for Unity. And then when he sees the potential, he's like, I don't want to make more war weapons.
Cannons are lame. Let's go to the moon.
Which, valid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked him too. And I liked all of the characters pretty much. Oh, actually, I do have one. This is not in our notes, but I do have one kind of gripe, which is that his cousin, the summoner, learns about what they're doing like halfway through the book, and then that's never brought up again.
Yeah, I got the impression that he was scheming something, but then we don't really get any follow through on that.
Yeah, I would have liked to see something that goes somewhere.
Yeah, it felt more like this world as imagined had demon summoning in it, and so the cousin was kind of just shoved in to tell the reader about that, which was too bad, because him and like his sort of bickering relationship with the imp that he has summoned, and there's all sorts of implications, but yeah, it kind of, this demon summoner and the pea bucket just kind of get lost.
Yeah. There were definitely some threads that could have been picked up that just kind of dangle.
But not Whitlaw. He was flawless.
Whitlaw was flawless.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Blue Sky and Instagram at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com or leave a comment on YouTube.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
We also have a Patreon where you can support us and find exclusive episodes and a lot of other nonsense.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated. Bye!
Bye.